Welcome back to module 1.3, and in this sub-module we are answering the question of why do agricultural entrepreneurs need to fundraise? But before we actually answer that question, there's also another question that is very valid. Do you even need any fundraising? People raise money when they have no idea exactly how they'll use that money for, and that's how someone raises the money supposedly for a farming enterprise to buy a tractor, but somehow that money lands in buying a Lamborghini, or they found themselves in the Maldives, in Seychelles, or any of these global exotic places. So it's very important to understand whether you actually need to raise money. But, well, we can actually make an assumption that, we have a justification. We need to raise money for our enterprise. So with that caveat, let's now plow through some of the classical reasons why you actually need to raise money. Now, we need to also underscore the fact that raising money can also be intrinsic. You can actually start from yourself, where you save some money, and then you begin to undertake your agripreneurial activities, say as a farmer. But there comes a point where your own reserves, your own savings are overstretched. So there are certain things such as capital investment, where you need to develop certain infrastructure, say on the farm, equipment. You probably want to set up your irrigation systems. You probably want to get into grain farming, such as maize production, the soyas, and probably want to go quite big, and you're looking at getting yourself, say, a tractor, or you want to do greenhouse farming. So there's quite a lot of what we call capex to expenditure that is very hungry for money beyond your savings. So that is one justifiable reason why you'd actually look at raising additional resources. Reason number two is for what is called OPEX, operational expenditure. It's not always that operational expenditure is very low. It's actually very dependent on the nature of the farming enterprise that you are involved in, or any other entrepreneurial activities that you are involved in beyond primary production. So let's just take an example of primary production in terms of operational expenditure. Those of you that have been in, say, poultry farming and have had good experience doing broiler chickens, then migrated to egg layer farming, you will actually note that one of the biggest operational expenditure for poultry farming is feed cost. So feed cost can actually be as high as 60 to even 70% of the total operational expenditure for poultry farming. So in that case, you actually realize that you might need to raise additional resources for you to meet the cost of that feed. Chickens eat every day. On average, my memory served me right, you're talking about 120 to probably 140 or 50 grams per chicken per day. So that's quite a lot of feed, depending on the quantum of the beds that you've got. I have actually seen quite a few elements of drama where someone comes to the farm and is like, "Hey, Bruno, I'm giving you these car keys. I need you to give me money because my chickens are dying. I didn't actually anticipate that these chickens eat that much." So you need to actually avoid such surprises and make sure that you arrange financing for such operational expenditure. If you're doing, say, crop farming, issues around crop nutrition, your fertilizers, different other inputs. One of the menacing ones that I've actually seen, I do farm English cucumber. That's the long cucumber. And the seed for English cucumber, for some reason, is one of the most expensive seed. I think it would be around $50 per seed, not seedling. So if you're actually looking at a seedling, that would actually be close to $1 per seedling. So that's quite expensive by any measure, because when you actually compare that with these other crops like maize, soya, that's just a fraction of the cost. So you actually note that depending on what you're farming, operational expenditure sometimes might actually require a line of credit, as we call it in finance. So that's the second reason why you'd actually look at getting into the market to look for additional resources. Let us now look at reason number 3. It's actually the issue of expanding and scaling up. After you've attained what is called a proof of concept, beyond a certain point, guys, you need to scale up. If you've been doing 300 cucumbers per day, probably you need to actually now double. That is what growth in your farming enterprise or any other entrepreneurial activity that you are involved in. So when you are expanding and scaling up, it actually requires quite some resources. If you are doing dairy farming, one of the things that you probably might be looking at is to improve your breed so that the new breed that you're bringing in, whether it's the Jerseys or any other breed, would actually, one, bring in better productivity, more milk for you. That's part of expanding, both in terms of the numbers, but also the productivity of the breed that you are bringing to the fore. So those are some of the elements. And at that point, when you are expanding, associating with good breeds of, say, dairy farming, that doesn't come cheap. They actually are quite expensive. The last time I checked, I think it was about $2,000 to $3,000 of one in-calf good breed of a dairy animal. Of course, that will fluctuate depending on where you are, which country you're in. But that's one of the reasons. If you are looking at greenhouse farming, if you've been farming on, say, one greenhouse, you probably now need to increase the number of greenhouses so that you actually expand. I remember ourselves, we actually transitioned from open field farming and then did some DIY greenhouse, started with one when we had a proof of concept, which is a very critical aspect. Then we looked at expanding to additional greenhouses. So even aspects such as acquiring additional land and even the costs associated with reaching new markets, those are all expansionary, scaling up related costs that might warrant you to look at a new line of credit. So that's the third reason why you might actually be looking at raising money. The fourth, and probably the last that we can look at in this module, is around risk management. There are certain situations where you realize you need to remodel how you farm, given that you've been exposed, especially now with these climatic conditions. And that is actually the case with myself. We started with open field farming, doing, say, sweet peppers, because we're doing these high value horticulture products. But then we actually realized that when it came to rain season, we were quite exposed with crops such as lettuce. It was getting rotten. And then the sweet peppers as well, when it was hot. There's a condition that is called sun scald. When you are farming in the open field, unfortunately, you end up sharing with the sun. The production losses attributed to sun scald can be as high as 30 to 40%. So if you want to minimize that, which is actually part of managing production-related risks, you actually need to look at additional resources to retrofit your production environment. So in our case, we've got a combination of shed nets and, of course, greenhouses. That is part of our climate adaptation suite, which implicitly is part of risk management. So that is one of the reasons why you would actually need to look at getting into the market as part of risk mitigation measures. So we've looked at 4 things. We talked about capital investment as one of the reasons, operational expenditure, that's OPEX, expansion and scaling up, as well as risk management. So those are some of the reasons why you'd certainly need to look at raising additional resources over and above your own savings. So guess we can end this module here, and then I will meet you in sub-module 1.4, where I bring to the fore the key considerations in fundraising for your agricultural venture. Have a lovely one. Bye-bye.